this year when it comes to the NBA. Allen Iverson going to the Detroit Pistons.
We're talking about practice.
That's right.
Not a game. We talking about practice. Practice, man. I mean, how silly is that?
Well, it's not really silly that he's in Detroit and who was it that he lost to? Was it the Nets? Iverson's debut?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, the Nets.
I believe it was New
The
Jersey.
Nets spoiling AI's debut as a Detroit Piston. Now, you said you kind of have a rant about this,
Yeah.
and I'm curious to see where you're going with it because, you know, Iverson's a future Hall of Famer.
Mhm.
If he goes back to old school Allen Iverson, where he can just roll off 30 in an instant, it could help Detroit. However, just in my opinion, and like I said, you're the basketball ambassador, so just let me see if I'm kind of getting what you're saying. You know, AI is completely different from what that Detroit franchise has always been. You know, it's never been the fast up and down team. It's been the old school toughness in the interior type of team, and it may be interesting of how much of a contrast it would be from AI's type of play to what the Detroit Pistons have traditionally been, which is a half-court team.
Love you to death, but that's not where I'm going at all with this.
Was that at least correct?
And no. Yeah, you were correct on your Allen Iverson statement, absolutely.
Okay, all right.
And before we start any basketball segment, since it is the start of the year, Ryan, we can't start the segment without me saying, don't fake the funk on a nasty dunk! Okay,
Oh,
now,
gosh,
here's
yes.
my gripe.
He hasn't played much, though, this year.
No, he hasn't. Here's my gripe. I would like, as a basketball ambassador, would like to officially put out a doctrine that from now on, the Denver Nuggets are referred to as the idiotic Denver Nuggets.
Wow, okay.
Here's my point. I've got no problem with the deal to send Iverson to the Pistons. I actually think it helps the Pistons tremendously because in that Eastern Conference, when you have Paul Pierce with the Boston Celtics, you have LeBron James with the Cleveland Cavaliers.
I gotta keep.
You're going to need that off-the-dribble scorer who, when called upon, can put up 30. And Iverson is just that. Worst-case scenario, Iverson's contract is up at the end of the year. Hasta la vista, cap room out the wazoo.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, because it does help the Pistons offensively. It does, you know, because you got a guy who's able to roll off 30 to 40 points in an instant. You know, he is that type of player. When he is on, he is on. But let me ask you this. You mentioned Paul Pierce. You mentioned LeBron James. Those are bigger guards in the Eastern Conference. Chauncey Billups is a guy who is a bigger guy that could have been able to match up with those guys defensively. Do you think they may have taken a hit on the defensive side of the ball because Iverson does give up some size compared to some of the bigger guards in the Eastern Conference, especially with LeBron James playing as physical as he does?
Well, sure. Allen Iverson is not going to bring you the defense that he, that somebody like Billups brought. But here, and I'm slowly whittling my way down to my point here, Chauncey Billups and Antonio McDyess going to Denver.
Which, by the way, McDyess may be coming back to Detroit because he's already went on record saying he does not want to play for Denver.
Hold on. I'm getting there. Let the ambassador go here. You have Chauncey Billups, who you're taking him out of a team environment, which, he was successful in Detroit because of that team. I mean, we saw the same thing happen with Ben Wallace. Ben Wallace hasn't been the same since he left Detroit. You're taking Chauncey Billups and putting him on a team in Denver. And my problem with Denver is, here's the two problems I have with Denver, why I want them to be called the idiotic Denver Nuggets. You send your defensive stalwart, Marcus Camby, to the Clippers to create cap room. Then, now granted, I realize Iverson's contract is up and you want to get something for him, but you take on Chauncey Billups with a 2-year contract that's going to saddle you and take away any cap room that you gain by getting rid of Camby.
Which that's a new
Smart
deal.
Move there, geniuses.
That's a new deal, by the way, right, with Billups? Because wasn't he a free agent? Then they went ahead and signed him to an... Okay.
Yep. And then you, and it could be by force with McDyess, you make the brilliant decision of waiving Antonio McDyess. And here is my gripe. If you want to be a winner, if you want to get out of the first round into the second round, which you have not been able to do for the last 5 years, good job, Carmelo Anthony, and your leadership skills, why would you get rid of McDyess? Now, I realize he's not going to play, and this is the whole, like everybody talks about Iverson and Billups and this being the big trade. Folks, this is the whole point of my point here. The whole landscape of the NBA can massively change with wherever Antonio McDyess goes. And there is strong rumors that the Boston Celtics intently want him. And in order for him to go back to Detroit, he has to wait 30 days. There are 18 teams in the NBA that are interested in Antonio McDyess. And it is not just because they feel like it, folks. This guy brings what is missing to a lot of NBA teams, and that is a mid-range game and defense. This guy, wherever he lands, is going to change the landscape of the NBA. If he lands with the Celtics, you have to look at this. He almost immediately walks into that starting lineup, and then you have a front court of Antonio McDyess, Paul Pierce, and Kevin Garnett. You can seal the East up with that front line because you have Kevin Garnett, who can do his thing in the middle, and you have Antonio McDyess's defense combined with Garnett's defense, and you have the shooting of Pierce and the shooting of McDyess. So that right there is huge. There are some other teams you got to look at who are going to be interested in him. You got to look at Houston. He can be a huge, huge help to Houston, and this man owns a home in Houston, so you got to keep that in mind. He would be a great, great relief for Sean Battier and Yao Ming, and he would also be a good mentor for Joey Dorsey, who's going to be a future part of that team, a big part of that team, the rookie Joey Dorsey.
From Memphis.
Yeah, from Memphis. And he would solidify the defense with Ron Artest.
Well,
so,
let's go back to what the rumor was, though. That
Okay.
McDyess had point blank said that the only team he was going to play for was the Pistons. In that scenario, it basically ends up being a straight-up trade between the Nuggets and the Pistons for Billups and Iverson.
Mhm.
So that still would be, advantage
Bad deal.
point for. Well, it would still be an advantage point for the Pistons.
Yeah, oh, sure. Absolutely.
Because you keep the guy that's going to, provide you that interior toughness, which is what he brings to an NBA team, like you mentioned.
Mhm.
So, I mean, let's not take that out of consideration either
Yeah.
because of the fact he did come out and say that the only team he would play for is Detroit.
Well, if he goes back to Detroit, he's got to wait the 30 days. And then it was a straight-up deal for Billups and Iverson. And again, that just proves why the Nuggets are the mess that they are. But you've got to remember he's got to sit that 30 days in order to go back to Detroit.
Right.
And there are a lot of teams that are going to persuade him. You got to remember there's 18 teams. That's a lot of teams that are interested in him.
Over half the
And they're
league.
going to throw some cash
It's about
at
as
you.
many playoff teams as
Yep.
there are in the NBA.
Yep, you've got the Celtics, and see, that's the thing. It's been said to many people confidentially that Antonio McDyess wants to win a championship, which is one of the reasons why he did not want to go to Denver. Now, he's got a chance in Detroit, but not, let's be realistic, that chance is not as good as it would be in Boston. That's,
no, not at all.
just real being real. He could go closer to home, like I said, to Houston. And if that Houston team lives up to its potential, they could be something in the West. Championship team, I'm not sure.
Well, they have some extra toughness with McDyess there because, they already have Artest,
Mhm.
who is actually, yes, he is a knucklehead, he is a head case, but I think it's going to benefit more because he's now going to be the third option.
Yeah.
He's got more of a role to fit into instead of being the main star. Because, look, the main stars on that Rockets team is Yao Ming and Tracy McGrady. Bottom line, plain and simple.
Yep.
You get Artest, who does provide some toughness, regardless of what you say he is mentally.
Mhm.
And, yes, he is a head case and, a few fries short of a value meal. But, it does add some extra toughness
Well, it
when you
beefs him
bring
up.
up McDyess as well. And, as a guy that has that mid-range jumper that's able to peel out on a pick and roll and hit the open 18-footer on the baseline,
Yep.
it would add to it. But it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, the McDyess factor.
Yeah, if he lands back in Detroit, this was a great deal for Detroit because you get, to your point earlier, Ryan, you're absolutely right. You lose some defense at the guard position with Iverson. That's no big secret. But you've got Stuckey, who we've seen do well in the playoffs last year, which I think signing him to a contract and him doing well, and there's that old saying, be careful what you ask for, but I think by him doing well and him getting the extension, that allowed them to move Billups. And you take the gamble. It's like anything else. You take that gamble of Iverson for 1 year. If it doesn't work out, well, he's a free agent anyway, and you got some cap room. Joe